Welcome to the Sports Note for Monday, February 24th. And note to self, if you're going to record an episode, remember not to have the microphone muted, pulling the curtain back a little bit as we typically end the Wise Guys Sports Show as the end credits run or we're running halftime. Mike and I will actually have our microphones muted so it's not picking up any background noise as graphics are overlaid, whether we're topping off drinks or running to the restroom, anything like that. I had this episode recorded last night and then realized, wait a minute, as I'm editing, there's no sound coming out of the video, and oh yeah, you forgot to unmute the microphone like a dumbass. So here's take two. But we're officially now out of the NBA All-Star weekend, actually more than a week out, and the trade deadline has long since come and gone. We're starting to see what teams are taking advantage of the moves that they made. The Lakers certainly appear to be have done everything right. The Mavericks appear to have done everything wrong since the mega trade. We actually thought what was going to happen with San Antonio making the swing to land De'Aaron Fox in the 3-team trade, and the idea was to be able to pair a player of the caliber of De'Aaron Fox, who's a star in this league, be able to pair him with a future Hall of Famer in Chris Paul, be able to put him with your number 4 overall pick from last June in Stephon Castle, be able to put him with Devin Vassell, your 11th overall pick back in 2020, and most importantly, put him with the reigning Rookie of the Year, and arguably one of the more dominant defensive players that we're going to see for a number of years in your number 1 overall pick last year, Victor Wembanyama, and also hopefully be able to get Greg Popovich back, and more on that here in a second. But then as we come out of the All-Star weekend, things go from bad to worse to San Antonio now starting to think towards the future in more ways than just next season. The reports came out is that as players return back to their squads, that naturally they go through physicals, have everything checked out. Well, it was reported on Friday evening that Victor Wembanyama was going to sit out the rest of the season. He was shut down by the Spurs as they found deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder, which is his shooting shoulder, which also was kind of categorized in blood clot form. Certainly not something that you would want for a 21-year-old, future, first team all player, all world, everything, and was going to be one of the focal points of this league for a number of years. Wembanyama was well on his way to winning Defensive Player of the Year this year and winning it in a walk. This was his first All-Star campaign. His numbers had actually gone up. His shooting percentage improved by more than a full point. His points per game had actually increased by more than 3 from a season ago. His rebounding numbers were up. His minutes were just slightly up, and be able to kind of get that production out of a guy where there's really, outside of Paul, there really wasn't too much in the cover. Devin Vassell's a good young player, putting in 15 points a game. Stephon Castle at one point was projected and ranked in as being the second best rookie in this class for Rookie of the Year rankings. He's now slipped to the top, to around 5th, if not outside the top 5 altogether, with some inconsistent shooting to where I want to say over the course of the last month, he's only broken 20 points twice, maybe 3 times, but he's averaging, between 10 and 17 points over the course of the last month. Not terrible, but not what you want the 4th overall pick in the draft to be, for a guy who you would like to be able to see supplant, Chris Paul in the backcourt. Now, granted, Stephon Castle's more of a shooting guard than a point guard. Being 6'6", he's you would like to think he's a little bit more of a scorer than a facilitator. But moving, but to be able to have, you would like to be able to have a little bit more production, especially with a guy like Wembanyama clogging up the middle as well as he does. But since landing De'Aaron Fox, Fox has actually, played very, very well. In the 7 games the Spurs had actually played up until when I originally recorded this last night, De'Aaron Fox was averaging 23 points a game, which was actually second on the team, only to Wembanyama averaging just a shade over 24. And now this is something where we're going to actually have to see what the Spurs are going to be able to get out of De'Aaron Fox, because when they made the trade, the Spurs were only a game and a half behind Golden State for 10th in the Western Conference, which would have gotten them into the play-in tournament, which is very, very important for them because the Spurs have not made the playoffs in 5 years, which is the longest stretch since the mid-1990s. And a lot of that is actually the other part of the bad news that they got, which was before Greg Popovich arrived. Now, we all know that Popovich has the NBA record for most regular season wins. He's got 5 championships. He's got 3 Coach of the Year awards. He's in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. Since he took over the reins in the summer of 1996, and his first year was the 96-97, lockout shortened season. Popovich has missed 2 games in his career, and those 2 games were in 2021 and 2023 respectively. One was for illness, and then the other was due to attend Tim Duncan's Hall of Fame induction, which happened to coincide right with a Spurs game, where Popovich, I believe, was inducting Duncan that night. But Popovich has not coached since November 2nd, when it was reported that he suffered a minor stroke, and he's actually been recovering and rehabbing, trying to get back on the sidelines. But then that's where the other piece of bad news comes in, is that it was also announced on Saturday, late Saturday afternoon into early Saturday evening, that Popovich would not return over the course of the last 28 games at that point for the Spurs, who again now have missed the playoffs 5 consecutive seasons, and have also not been out of the first round since running to the Western Conference Finals back in 2017, when Golden State beat them as part of when Golden State won 3 titles in 4 years. And that was right smack in the middle of that. That was the year after Cleveland upset Golden State, or else Golden State would have had 4 in a row at that point. But now the other part of the report with Popovich, not only is he not going to return, but it's also something where he's going to be heavily reevaluating his future and with future plans, because Popovich is 76 years old. He's accomplished everything in this sport that could be done. He's coached Olympic gold medal teams. He's been on staffs. Again, he's already in the Basketball Hall of Fame. But for them to miss the playoffs 5 consecutive years, we knew that it was going to be part of a rebuild. He didn't actually think it was going to take this long. But now you have to start thinking of really what's next if you're San Antonio. Mitch Johnson, one of his assistants, has actually been the interim coach since then, and Johnson was the interim head coach for those 2 games that Popovich missed a few years ago. But also on his staff is former Philadelphia head coach Brett Brown. Now, Brown actually coached Philly for, I want to say, 7, maybe 8 years, and has definitely got some chops to him. He was there with the start of Joel Embiid and watching Embiid blossom into an MVP. He was there through the Ben Simmons debacle. He was there through the James Harden years, which obviously did not work out the way that they planned. You cannot put all of that on Brett Brown. You also have to keep in mind that between those three names that I just rattled off. There's a lot of there's talent there, but there's also a lot of drama that comes involved with that, and especially seeing Embiid get booed in a game with Philly just last week on his home floor. It's definitely something to think about, that if Popovich does have to walk away and give up the coaching reins, would they stay with Mitch Johnson? Would they actually elevate Brett Brown with his resume and the fact that he's got head coaching experience with top level talent? And Wembanyama is certainly a top level talent. And going to be for years to come. And now the unfortunate thing, getting back to Wembanyama for a minute, was that now with the loss of Wembanyama, San Antonio has fallen back a little bit, and they've now actually fallen 3 games out of the last spot and fading fast because they are not that far ahead of Portland for 13th. In the Western Conference. So they've got a lot of ground to make up, and they don't have a whole lot of time to do it. And when the guy who basically makes your offense go in Wembanyama, now not to take anything away from De'Aaron Fox, he's a great player. But San Antonio is one of those rare teams where you've got a true center, and you can run the offense through him. The Knicks did it for years with Patrick Ewing, but they also put a lot of other players around him. Houston did it for years with Akeem Olajuwon, but again, they actually had how they were able to win back-to-back championships in the 90s. The 2 years that Michael had stepped away, because you were able to surround him with great talent. A Clyde Drexler, a Kenny Smith, a Robert Horry. But there's, this is San Antonio is going to be a very good team if a lot of these top tier picks work themselves out. And there's nothing to tell me or anybody else out there that it's not going to happen, because De'Aaron Fox is going to actually be, he's going to be able to elevate his game. Knowing that he actually has other options. No disrespect to Sabonis in Sacramento, but he's not Victor Wembanyama, who's this good, this young, in only his second season. And you would hope that Wemby can actually come back from something like this, get himself right in time for next year. But what are the Spurs going to look like next year? Is Stephon Castle going to be able to take that next step? Is Vassell going to be able to continue his play? Is Fox going to actually be able to continue like this now with all the extra pressure sitting on him? Does Chris Paul at 39 years old walk away? Who's going to be the head coach next year? They're going to shake. The Spurs are you would certainly don't want to see them shake things up, but unfortunately, as the title of this video says, this unfortunately looks like a teardown in the middle of a rebuild, and the Spurs have been rebuilding for the last several years, hence missing the playoffs 5 straight years. But you would absolutely hate to see them have to tear most of this down and be able to keep some sort of the foundation in place, knowing that your regime is going to be changing with the changing of the guard of Popovich, more than likely moving on, whether he actually moves into the front office, whether he actually coaches part of the year and brings, Brett Brown or Johnson kind of along in his system, whether he moves in, whether he takes a gap off, whether he completely walks away, whether he actually moves into like an NBA, executive type role, like a Phil Jackson or a Larry Brown could do after they officially retired. But you would definitely like to see some form of stability, and they've got the good young talent around there to be able to do so. And you certainly don't want to stunt the growth when you've got 4 very good young talent, and 3 of which are homegrown draft prospects, to be able to bring this thing forward. If they're able to kind of move forward and possibly get back into playoff contention, I'd actually like to see what De'Aaron Fox would be able to do. I would actually hope that he might be able to pull Stephon Castle along with him in that backcourt and be able to help Castle elevate his game now, knowing that they're going to have to rely on the two of them a little bit more because their post presence has dramatically diminished. San Antonio, again, with Paul, you're going to have that leadership, but it comes down to Chris Paul is 39 years old. If he walks away at the end of this year, he's a Hall of Famer, even though he doesn't have a ring. He's got a gold medal. He's 39 years old. If he comes back for next season, what kind of effect is he really even going to have, except for basically another assistant coach, essentially, that can suit up and give you 20 minutes a night, maybe 25. His scoring numbers are way down, but his assists are definitely up. And I apologize for the jump cut as the issues with my camera have suddenly resumed here. But again, getting back to Chris Paul, outside of winning an NBA championship, has done everything in his career that he's really wanted to. Multiple All-Star game over All-Star game. He's consistently towards the top of the league in assists. Now, he did actually kind of do the James Harden route where, he had a cup of coffee in San Antonio. He actually, he was with the Clippers for a few years. So he's now essentially the hired gun. But is he really going to want to stay and have to go through this knowing that, with the last year or two, does he maybe try and chase a ring finally, which he was hoping to do and just never got the chance to with the Clippers for how much they underperformed during that time frame. But it starts and it ends with Popovich, and it'd be nice to be able to see what he could do maybe with a full year of Wembanyama and especially this talent, and it would have been very nice to actually see what he can actually do with Wembanyama and Fox, and also be able to see, again, can he pull some of these other guys with him? Can he actually squeeze a little bit more out of a guy like a Bismack Biyombo? But the next week and a half are going to be very, very telling to be able to see if San Antonio uses this as motivation for next year, and knowing if they can get there. Does Wembanyama come back as a force? Does it make Pop want to come back for one more year, get back to the playoffs one final time? Or do they actually not so much blow up the team, because that's certainly not going to happen, but do they kind of blow up the process and then maybe try and do a fast rebuild here, knowing that they're going to have one more lottery pick to be able to try and bring this whole thing together with all of their homegrown talent minus Fox, who is just coming into the prime of his career. So let me know what you guys think. Wise Guys 100th episode was last night. That's up in the on-demand on our channel if you want to go see that. Mike has actually started a blog, and definitely go check that out as well. And I will see you guys very, very soon in the next one, and hopefully my camera will be fixed, and I will remember to have the microphone unmuted so I don't have to do this twice. So everybody take care.